Welcome to SatoshiConomy, honest global crypto news and info, where the message is more important than the messenger. You won't learn this in school. What won't you learn in school? What we're going to talk about today is financial independence. Today is July 4th, 2019. Happy Independence Day. Yeah, you won't learn this in school. The notion of freedom, what is freedom? That's the question I have for you. And what independence and freedom, what that really denotes is very fundamentally just the freedom of movement, the freedom of forward momentum, the freedom to be able to attain to the choices that you make. And I'm going to discuss some of where the notion of what is money, where does it come from, and how is it designed in the world today, and specifically in America. Those are some things that they just don't teach you in school. And I'll mention some things that I experienced as I've traveled around the world. And I do stack the show notes with links to some really good news articles that are pertinent to some events that are very current, and also links to other videos for those of you who want to go down the rabbit hole a little bit further. And just as a reminder, I do type a description or a little bit of a storyline in every video that I do, and do the links, because even a year later, if you remember some things that I've talked about, then you can come back to the video and then click on it, and then you can go down to further information on it. So it's just a service that I provide. So one reason why I want to discuss what they don't teach you in school is because it needs to be taught. It will help us to be understanding and have the knowledge of how all the money works and how the financial system works, because then we can have a better advantage to take care of our own, to do well for our family. It reminds me of a quote by Henry Ford. He said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said something like this: if people knew how the banking system works, or if people knew how money works, I'm sure that there would be a revolution by morning. So when you think about that, it's like he was a well-connected individual, of course, and when he knew what things were going on behind the scenes, if people really knew what was going on, they'd be pretty upset. So in 1913 was the creation of the Federal Reserve, and if you want to Google some names, there were some, when you think about the magnates that were in place or in power in that time, we think of J.P. Morgan, we think of Andrew Carnegie. Those are some big names that come, but there's some names that really funded them and were there before, some banking families that were existent even from the 1800s and the 1700s. But there's a who's who of names here. There's four families that are kind of based in New York: Rockefeller, Kuhn, Loeb, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it's Kuhn and Loeb. They kind of joined forces. They're out of New York. The Lehman family out of New York, Goldman Sachs out of New York, and of course the Rothschilds have bases in London and Paris and elsewhere. Seif family out of Rome, that's S-E-I-F, and Warburg family out of Hamburg. So these are some very, very important names, and what they were able to do was to create a banking system that really controls the interest rate and the production of money. The Federal Reserve is an independent, it's a private company with shareholders, and essentially, simply put, or briefly put, the U.S. government writes them an IOU in the form of bonds, and then they print money, and when a dollar is created, the moment it's created, it's only worth 94 cents. And then they also, as a kind of a concoction of creation of money, they control the interest rate. And so it's really controlled by a very, very few people. And it's no wonder that, like the Rothschild family, for example, have made a pact amongst their family that they will never discuss publicly the extent of their wealth, or they'll never talk about figures. And why not? Obviously, of course, because people would be in uproar if they really understood the extent of their wealth. The 8 families, or the 8 names that I just mentioned, it's estimated that they are in the top Fortune 500 companies. For almost virtually every single one of the top 500 largest companies on the stock market, those families are in the top 10 of shareholders of every single company in the Fortune 500 virtually. So the extent of their wealth is just obviously massive. Now through the design, they created a debt design where money is created and starts flowing around, and there's this currency, this current, this motion and fluidity, and it creates markets and other companies that are created as a result of it. I get that. But when we talk about the 1%, we're not talking about the 1%. It's really more like the 0.00001%, and that's not an exaggeration. And so we do have an option in today's market, in today's world, in today's economy, and it's Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that are likewise designed the same way. It is inherently designed by mathematical equation. In 75 years from now, I can tell you within a very minute, I can tell you how many Bitcoins there will be that are existent. The rate that Bitcoins are birthed or opened up into the economy is very, very specific. So it's very designed in that way, and it has no owners, it has no office. And so just by that very nature, it is independent. It promotes it promotes a free market economy. It's really controlled by people as a whole. It's controlled by freedom. It's controlled by independence. It's controlled by a free market dynamics where the market is never wrong. If the price of or the value of Bitcoin goes up, it's because people continue in their faith or belief or confidence in the system, and they purchase more, they use more, and that's really the only reason why the value of it would go up or why the value of it would go down, because people are selling it. So it really has to do with faith and confidence in an independent currency and economic. So that's kind of in a nutshell the difference between those two economies, how an independent or a free economy stands in the face of a banking culture which has existed for centuries now. Recently, we've heard Facebook Libra being launched. They opened up their white paper on June 18th, and as a result of that, well, they're shooting for first part of 2020 to actually launch the project. I really believe that will not happen then. With day one after the launch of the information through the white paper, Maxine Waters, for example, a congresswoman, I think she heads up what's called the Congressional Committee of Financial Services or something like that. She called for them to, hold. And earlier this week, as a matter of fact, they actually sent a letter to Mark Zuckerberg and to David Marcus, who is the CEO or overseer of the Libra project. A really, really good executive, but they called for a congressional hearing or for them to stop any more movement. Also, other nations, I think France, a financial executive or a financial politician there, 2 days after called for them to stop progress, and it really stands in the face of what it looks like. It stands to disintermediate or disrupt the central banking system with this new competing currency. It's a digital currency. It's not a cryptocurrency, but in that respect, it's really good because it's causing some ripple effect. It's causing some quaking movements, and really looks like it's some sort of an epicenter for discussion now. It's also really shown that Bitcoin is not at all like what will be a Libra coin, because there's so many controls. I mean, if you just from one respect think that it can be told to stop, well, Bitcoin can't be told to stop, and that is one very, very powerful inherent characteristic that it has. It's permissionless, it's borderless, and it doesn't dance to any particular drummer. It listens to no one except the free market as a whole. So it really represents independence. I traveled to Dubai and also Muscat, Oman, and that was very interesting. I mean, Dubai is an awesome, awesome place. I have some great, great friends there that I really admire. They showed me the town. If you ever have an opportunity to go there, don't miss it. I mean, they have it's the biggest, tallest, widest, greatest, newest. It's awesome. But one thing that I was a little bit troubled by is just this. It just seemed like there was this omnipresent overseer, like cameras everywhere, and I get that. But even in some of the transit points, like you go from a taxi to a bus or to a tram or to something else, there was just this area that you had to cross. It seemed to me like it was electronic tracking and tracing technology that I really didn't like. It certainly is a different religious culture than what is available in America, where there's the freedom, but it was a very different culture, which I appreciate. I'm not speaking against that, but when I traveled from Dubai to Oman by bus, I had 2 escorts with me, and then as we crossed, everybody had to get off the bus, and this was a little bit harrowing. Had to take your belongings and stand by your belongings on this table, and there was a militia there with AK-47s out. It was a little bit scary, but they had the bloodhound sniff all our stuff. Then they went back onto the bus, the empty bus, and sniffed that out, and then come back to the table and everybody's belongings. And so it was a little bit heavy-handed there. And I imagine there's some of that going on if you cross from Mexico into the U.S. And if you as you travel the world, you got to go through customs, and I get that. But just the notion of Oman's particular brand of freedom was different than how it goes in America. So I do appreciate the freedoms that we do have in this country, and I really do appreciate the freedoms that true cryptocurrencies afford the common man. It is really truly the greatest opportunity in the history of mankind for financial independence and for us to be able to participate in an economy that is truly open to free market. So it's very, very powerful. And the world is taking notice, and recently now, because of the maturation of financial infrastructures and coding of the project Bitcoin and others, and because of other companies being involved and other nations. I mean, there was Uzbekistan, and I forget the other two. They asked the IMF, and they told the IMF, hey, we want to do Bitcoin bonds as a financial instrument. Afghanistan was one of them. I forget the third one. But earlier this week, I heard a project is set to launch that will begin to utilize the notion of a Bitcoin bond, which is an incredible, I mean, that is a huge topic just for conversation, because just for the fact that it involves Bitcoin and that it can be utilized as a way of transferring and merchandising or financing particular movements of between economies is just wow. And the Bank of International Settlements, BIS, they made a comment earlier this week. They said, hey, we're getting to that, meaning they're going to be developing their own digital currency, and now they're late to the game, but they're seeing that even on a global scale. I mean, the BIS is the central bank of central banks. I understand 60 different central banks own or fund that project, that bank. So it has really reached the top and the highest connections on earth, and for a really good reason. And I just encourage you to do your own research. This is not financial advice, but just because I just said that, hey, listen up, get some, and just choose to do something about whether you choose to not get some or get some. But it's really bodes well for true independence. Please check out the show notes. Please click on the blue planet. Take power and the independence of your own power into your own hands, and I appreciate it if you subscribe. And really, what independence truly is something that is from within. It's a choice to not allow anything on the exterior to control, and it is a liberating and a very powerful notion to have true independence from within. Independence is a choice, and if we can do that all together in something as important as money and a financial product like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, well, that's very, very cool. Again, please take power in your own hands. Click on the planet. I appreciate it, and subscribe. And hope you have a very good Independence Day, July 4th, 2019, and until next time, peace.